used to put his enemies in drums, pour gasoline on them and set them on fire. Tell us more about him and how he was captured and what it means.
Yeah, that's right, Michael. I mean, he really has been a pioneer of some of the most gruesome violence that we've seen in Mexico, you know, over the last few years. And as you say, the leader of one of, if not the most powerful cartel in Mexico, with tentacles stretching from Central America through Mexico and all the way into the United States. He was apprehended on Monday morning at around 3:45 in the morning in an area just south of Nuevo Laredo, a border city and a key city for the transiting of drugs, a strategically important area for Los Zetas. The Marines say they had the area under surveillance for some months prior to his apprehension, and they caught sight of a pickup truck round about 3:30 on Monday morning, and they launched a joint operation involving a helicopter and ground troops. They were able to stop the pickup truck without a shot fired, and they found Trevino Morales $2 million in cash, 8 heavy weapons, and 2 other men. And the area where he was apprehended has actually been, you know, an area of his where he basically built his career in the drugs industry. He started at a low level, on a street level in Nuevo Laredo. At some point he lived apparently in the United States city of Dallas. He's thought to have lived in. By 2005, he was running Nuevo Laredo for Los Zetas, and was basically trafficking millions of dollars of drugs into the United States. And apparently, according to US prosecutors, he was also organizing hit squads to carry out attacks within the United States. So he was finally indicted in 2009 and had a $5 million reward on his head.
Now, he was said to burn his enemies alive or even disembowel them. Now, the man who led one of Mexico's most notorious drugs gangs has been captured, a major victory in the drugs war. Miguel Angel Trevino, who headed the much-feared Los Zetas Cartel, was seized near the Texas border. His car was packed with weapons and $2 million in cash. This report by our Washington correspondent Matt Fry does contain images that some of you might find distressing.
The chubby man in black looks remarkably relaxed for a drug czar who's just been arrested for mass murder. Miguel Angel Trevino wasn't even a household name. He'd only been running the infamous Los Zetas since October. He was captured on this country road near the Texan border. With him, his bodyguard, his accountant, $2 million in cash, and an arsenal of weapons, not one of which was fired. And the official mugshot of Trevino is a vintage piece of understatement, probably responsible for illicit acts, it states. What Trevino was running was as much a death and torture squad as a drugs cartel. And those illicit acts, well, if you have a weak stomach, please leave the room now. Here's a very small sample. Most of it is simply too grisly to show. There was the summary beheading of 200 migrants. The casino fire which killed at least 50. The preferred method of killing involves beheading with chainsaws. Other victims are dissolved in vats of acid. Much of this was filmed by the Zetas, a kind of show and tell of horrors. Unimaginable brutality has become common currency in Mexico's drug war, which has claimed more lives than Syria's civil war. At least 85,000 since 2006, when the authorities began to crack down on the cartels. Today's arrest has been hailed as a major victory by the state, but what difference will it make? The Zetas Cartel boasts 10,000 members. What started off as a group of rogue special forces has become a state within a state. Its bosses have been arrested before. They are quickly replaced. Trevino, known mainly by his number Z40, replaced this man in October, whose name has already been forgotten. Which was about the same time that Enrique Peña Nieto took office. Mexico's president, the good-looking one on the right, congratulated by his illustrious guest from Washington for stamping on crime and corruption. But if it weren't for the demand for drugs from America, Mexico wouldn't have a problem. It produces few drugs itself, but it is the gateway to the American market across the border. The curse of corruption meets the curse of geography.
Paraded for the cameras, these men are suspected of killing dozens of people in the Gulf Coast state of Veracruz.
After being captured, they told us of another 3 safe houses where 32 bodies were found.
The Navy says the suspects are part of the so-called New Generation gang, and that the group was also behind the killing of 35 people whose bodies were dumped on a highway in Veracruz 2 weeks ago. Along with the New Generation suspects, on Friday the Navy showed off a dozen members of the Zetas gang, including the group's alleged leader of its Veracruz branch. Last week, a group linking themselves to the New Generation proclaimed they were the Mata Zetas, or Zetas killers.
Buenas tardes.
In their paramilitary-style web video, they implied they had been responsible for the previous 35 killings from 2 weeks ago, saying they were clearing the streets of the Zetas, one of Mexico's main drug gangs. Despite the Mata Zetas' vigilante posturing, the Navy says all these killings were carried out by just another drug gang fighting for turf.
Se subraya que solo se trata de otro grupo del crimen organizado.
It's stressed that this is another criminal organization that is a rival to the Zetas, a cartel that is battling for control of the Veracruz region, for illegal activities and resources, and to commit crimes against society.
Analysts say the killings in Veracruz show how little fear the gangs have of authorities.
What this looks like, it's an operation that was very well carried out in order to get the attention of the media, to get the attention of society and the attention of institutions. Basically saying, we are here, we control the territory and we know what to do.
The killings came just a day after the Mexican government launched a joint military-police crackdown in Veracruz, and on the very same day, such an operation was launched in the Pacific state of Guerrero. It's unclear if these operations will stop the continuing violence or add to it. In fact, in other states with similar operations, there's been a marked increase in killings and a marked increase in allegations of human rights abuses. Adam Rainey, Al Jazeera, Mexico.
What makes the Zetas really different? Their calling card started with violence, and the drug trafficking came later.
They are considered the most ruthless and violent among the Mexican drug cartels. Quite a title. So 4 years ago, when the FBI received a tip that the Zetas were getting into American quarter horse racing, FBI Special Agent Scott Lawson wasn't sure what to think. He would eventually find cartel drug money was indeed going to the ponies.
They're off in the dash for cash futurity.
When these races happened in the United States, the Zetas in Mexico would meet at a ranch and watch it online, and it'd be a big celebration.
A tempting dash in his second start.
The idea was to take cartel drug money and wash it clean on the dirt tracks of the United States. Tempting Dash, the winner of this race in Dallas, bought, trained, and raced with Zeta money. For FBI Special Agent Scott Larson, the proof was in the winner's circle. The owner was the Zeta Cartel leader's brother, Jose Trevino. Notice the signs that Trevino's daughter and son are holding. They are Zeta call signs.
So that's when we knew that we were on the right track. In the beginning, they really tried to hide under the radar, but it seemed as time went on that they believed their own scheme almost, and they got more brazen and more bold.
Lawson would spend years tracking hundreds of horses, trainers, and the Trevino brothers. The leader of Los Zetas is Miguel Trevino. His brother Jose lived near Dallas, was a bricklayer by trade, and had no prior criminal record. But almost overnight in 2010, he became a player in quarter horse racing. Lawson unraveled the scheme. The IRS followed the money.
By the time 2010, 2011 rolled around, they were going to all the major auctions in the industry and basically outbuying legitimate historical buyers of all the best horses at auction.
This YouTube video shows Jose Trevino at a quarter horse award ceremony. He bought a ranch, had his family move there, along with 522 horses for racing and breeding.
Jose actually told some cooperators in the case that he was living the American dream.
And part of this elaborate scheme played out here at Retama Park. The FBI found cartel horses ran here and at other tracks in Texas, Oklahoma, New Mexico, and California. The Zetas would send cocaine into the U.S. and make hundreds of millions of dollars. Part of that would be given to Mexico businessmen who would set up straw companies and then wire money directly to horse auction houses or people in the U.S., funneling money from drug kingpins to the sport of kings. Thanks to the FBI and the IRS, they would lose it all.
Approximately $26 million through the horses, and then you had the planes, you had additional bank accounts. So you're talking up around 40, 45, 50, $60 million.
In assets and money.
Yes.
The U.S. is not the place to be the safe haven, to come and flee and feel safe from the violence that they've created.
The FBI and IRS would seize it all, even horse embryos and semen. The cartel's American dream of a legitimate business, gone. Because of the FBI and the IRS investigation, 10 people were convicted of money laundering, including Jose and Miguel Trevino. The FBI is still looking for 7 fugitives believed to be in Mexico. Now, to take a look at the horses seized and the cartel members arrested and involved, go to ksat.com. We have 2 slideshows posted. All you have to do is click on this.
Major news this morning in the drug war. One of the top leaders of the Ruthless Los Zetas drug cartel is under arrest. He's Miguel Angel Trevino Morales. Mexican Marines captured him yesterday just across the border from the United States. Our senior correspondent John Miller is a former FBI assistant director. Good morning.
Good morning, Charlie.
So how significant is this guy and his organization?
Well, first you have to understand Los Zetas. Mexico has been carved up by different violent drug cartels, but Los Zetas is former Mexican Special Forces commandos who were hired by the Gulf cartel to be their enforcers, and brutal enforcers they were until they looked up one day and said, why are we doing the dirty work and not getting the big money? So they formed their own cartel. Their trademark was to go into town, figure out who was cooperating with law enforcement, who was working for a rival gang, behead everybody, and ride out of town, leaving that as an example. Very feared gang.
And how did they get him?
So Trevino is the leader of Los Zetas. He's the first leader who has not been a former member of Special Forces, but the people working for him are. He was riding down a dirt road. A helicopter gunship with Marines in it stopped his pickup truck. An arrest team moved in from behind. They had been laying in wait on the possibility he might travel this road, and they arrest him, they arrest his bodyguard, they arrest his accountant. Why are you riding with your accountant? They capture 8 guns because there's also $2 million in the truck. That's how he rolls.
What do you think the impact is on the United States?
Well, Los Zetas, on a weekly basis, sends hundreds of pounds of cocaine and marijuana across the U.S. border with a massive network. FBI intelligence bulletins that I've seen talk about Los Zetas trying to recruit among the Mexican mafia gang in the Texas prison and expand its reach into the United States. So it's going to be significant. On the other hand, one thing about this group, because they come from a military background, when a leader is disposed of, as happened in 2008, they don't have the traditional battle for succession inside. The military hierarchy dictates that the next most qualified person with seniority moves up. So we may see his brother emerge as a leader.
Because he succeeded somebody not long ago himself.
That's right. The last boss was killed in a big shootout in 2008. But if you think about that, from 2008 to 2013, this is a very significant move to take out the leader again. I mean, they've had that long to be in power for Trevino.
John, thank you.
What's going on, you guys? Welcome back. Another episode of Greenlit Gang TV. Appreciate you guys checking out the video. Today we're going to be talking about Miguel Angel Trevino Morales, former leader of the Los Zetas cartel, a very infamous, very formidable Mexican drug cartel. More than just that, though, I feel like they are recognized as a Mexican criminal syndicate and terrorist organization. Best known for their brutal shock and awe tactics, their brutal levels of violence that Miguel Trevino took to whole new heights. These guys, in a world of bad guys, these guys stood out head and shoulders above them. They were the boogeyman. They were the guys that showed up, and it was all bad. It was all bad if these guys came to your front door. They truly struck fear into their enemies, into the locals. You know, they had no problem wiping out entire cities, entire groups of people. They killed indiscriminately. They are very notorious. And like I said, Miguel Angel Trevino Morales took that to a whole new level. So, a little bit of background on the Zetas. This video is about Miguel Trevino, so we're going to do more on him. But just a quick background on the Zetas, okay? They were formed in the late 90s when commandos of the Mexican army deserted their ranks. They began working as enforcers for the Gulf Cartel. They were like a security arm of the Gulf Cartel, and they were the best of the best. So let's not get things twisted here. They were the best of the best, all right? They were corrupt federal and state police officers, army personnel, special forces of the Guatemalan military. Interestingly enough, Miguel Angel Trevino was not ex-military, but he was on the ground floor of the Zetas. They really liked him because, as we'll get into his background, he was born in Nuevo Laredo, which is where the Zetas originally formed. And he was basically raised, obviously, in Mexico, but he had a lot of connections to the United States, spent a lot of time over there. His family had businesses over there. So he was fluent English and Spanish, which is a huge key and a huge resource for these cartels to have somebody on both sides of the border. He was able to move contraband very easily. So no, he was not ex-military or military at the time, but he was a very, very valuable resource. So, like I said, late 90s, Gulf Cartel security wing. They got their name Los Zetas after its first commander, Arturo Guzman de Sina. He was a federal police officer, a high-ranking one at that. His police radio code was Z1, and the Z stands for a high-ranking federal judicial police officer in charge of a city. And from there, they start doing their thing. They start making money by means that you would expect a cartel and these criminal organizations to make money. All right, drug trafficking, number one. Then they have sex or prostitution and gun rackets, assassinations for hire, extortions, kidnappings. Like I said, primary located in Nuevo Laredo, Tamaulipas. I know I'm saying that wrong. Right across the border from Laredo, Texas, which is where our person of this video, Miguel Trevino Morales, was born, right there in Nuevo Laredo. Spent a lot of time in Laredo, Texas, like I said. So if you just do a Google search, just watch this video and jump over to Google, type in Los Zetas. What you will see and what everybody really affiliates these guys, and when I've watched videos on them, are their extreme acts of violence. So in a world of bad guys and in a world of bad people, like I said, they stand head and shoulders above everybody. And Miguel Trevino, for the people that crossed him or the people that he deemed enemies or people that he just felt got in the way, unfortunately for them, he took everything to a whole new level of psychopathy. The guy was just a sadistic killer. I've seen interviews with his hitmen, people that he recruited at a young age to commit murder, to commit acts of violence, boiling people alive, burning people alive, killing people, all kinds of craziness. Just a true, I would say a true evil person. Did what he had to do. Mind you, he grew up in a rough life, but when you read about some of the stuff he really did, it just becomes something that I think he enjoyed. He's a serial killer. I really don't know what other way to put it. Just like I would say the same thing about these mob guys that took killing to a whole nother level. They enjoyed it. It becomes something different. You're not just doing it for your gang. You're not just doing it for protection. You're doing it because you like the power and you enjoy it. So a little quick note too. By 2010, the Zetas had broken away from the Gulf Cartel, and they had formed their own criminal organization. And like I said, Miguel Angel Trevino Morales played a big part in all of this. He was there from the beginning, till his arrest. So Miguel Angel Trevino Morales, born November 18th, 1970 in Nuevo Laredo, Tamaulipas, Mexico. Like I said, at a young age had joined the security arm of the Gulf Cartel. And if you know anything about, kind of his early life, what I read about, unfortunately for him, it was pretty much expected that his life would maybe not reach the heights it reached as far as criminality and the power that he ended up having. But, what I read about him, basically raised in a family of 6 brothers, 6 sisters. Family had businesses, though, on the other side of the border. So like I said, he spent a lot of time over in Texas, Dallas, Texas in particular. But he does have a moment in his life that I'm sure had a big impact on him. His father abandons the family at a pretty young age for Miguel Trevino Morales. So he is basically forced to raise his siblings. And what do you need to raise a family? You need money, okay? So he joins a local gang, Los Zetas. And again, we talk about his resourcefulness, move contraband back and forth across the border. He was fluent in both English and Spanish. He was recruited by Ociel Guillen, who had headed the Gulf Cartel. And they talk about his time that he spent in Dallas, Texas, as one of those things that was like a big turning point in his life. So he worked, it said that he was poor, but he worked for wealthy Hispanics. He worked for wealthy Americans doing landscape work, doing all kinds of stuff. And he grew to have a lot of resentment, for Mexico's class disparity, which they said could have resulted in the kind of violence you saw when he was an adult. And then they said the time he spent in the U.S., he learned a lot about, U.S., what are we? Money, power, respect, the weapons, and our penchant for drug use. The United States loves its drugs. They just really do. And he saw this. And that they also saw the anti-Mexican bias among Americans and, how Mexican immigrants were treated. But at the same time, he viewed Dallas as his home because he had a lot of families there and surrounding areas. So it was nothing for him to go back and forth across the border. He'd gotten in a little bit of trouble driving a car, not pulling over. I read that he was charged with avoiding arrest. He had to pay like a $600-something fine, was released. So one of the guys that he did chores for, and one of the guys that, he's fixing up the yards and washing his cars, was a man by the name of Hector Manuel Saceda Gamboa, alias was El Cariz. He actually became his mentor. And down the road, Trevino Morales would replace him as Zetas leader in Nuevo Laredo when he was moving up through the ranks. So just to give you a little background on this. So he's got ties to the Zetas, as a young adult. But even back as a teenager, he's joining the local gangs, the Los Zetas. He's forced to raise his family from a young age because his dad left. And he's learning the inner workings of the underworld and how things really work. And from what it sounds like, getting a taste of reality at a young age and was forced to grow up at a very young age. And this is just to kind of give you an idea of how things became what they became. So, gets introduced to the Zetas, gets introduced to the Gulf Cartel. All right. Starts moving up. Became the regional boss in 2005 of Los Zetas in Nuevo Laredo. That's when he replaced his mentor. All right, Hector Manuel Saceda Gamboa, he took over that position in 2005. He was instructed to fight off the Sinaloa cartel. El Chapo Guzman has made that cartel very famous. They need no introduction. From there, basically to fight off for their territory, to maintain their territory, and he did. His efforts were successful. From there, he moved to Veracruz. He was the head of that state after the death of another trafficker, Efren Teodoro Torres. The thing with Trevino Morales, violence follows him everywhere he goes. Okay, so these are, but he's put in these positions where defend your territory, take over new territory, and do whatever it takes by any means necessary to win. And I'm sure there's a fear amongst some of these members that if they don't succeed, they're going to be killed themselves. They talk about the Laredo Nuevo area, where he was born, where he was raised, where he knows the ins and outs. It's a very lucrative area because of Interstate 35. It serves kind of as a like basically a route into San Antonio, Dallas, Austin, Texas, into the United States. He was killing people on both sides of the border, right? He was committing assassinations in the U.S., assassinations in Mexico. And like I talked about a little bit in the beginning, he was good at identifying young people, just as he was identified when he was a teenager, who were next up, grooming them and becoming young assassins, showing them the life. They were called Little Zetitas or Little Zetas, all right? Let them join as young as 12. First they were smugglers, then they show him how to kill. And there is an interview, if you guys check it out on YouTube. The guy's got some tattoos on the face. He's in a prison cell. He talks about being around him and going out to one of his ranches and seeing him kill people, and he actually lied to Trevino Morales, saying that, yeah, I've killed people before, but in reality he hadn't, and he actually for the first time was told to shoot somebody, and he did. So they're fighting the Sinaloa cartel. He's building his way up, all right? Takes over Veracruz, does his thing there as well, okay? And that was after the death of Efren Teodoro Torres. After Veracruz, he's told to go to Guatemala to wipe out his competitors, okay? Now, he's along with another leader, Lascano, I hope I'm saying that right. They formed an allegiance with the Beltran Leyva cartel. They had just gone to war with the Sinaloa cartel, who are El Chapo Guzman, Ismael El Mayo Zambada. Beltran Leyvas believed that El Chapo had betrayed them. So, Trevino Morales, the Beltran Leyva cartel, they joined up to go kill the leader of the Sinaloa cartel, El Chapo. And basically, you know, it's a horrible, bloody war. He's killing rival drug traffickers. He's killing people in Guatemala. He's killing people all over. Now, remember, the Zetas have a paramilitary style of attack. They are based in military action. They know how to attack. They know how to attack. They know how to ambush. And they were really doing this. Now, if we fast forward some years, the original members of those Zetas cartel had died off. The new people that were recruited in were not of military background. That's why some people say the Zetas fell off a little bit, because yes, the killing was up, the depravity was up, the violence was up, but that base of knowing and understanding your enemy and having really good organizational skills and good planned skilled attacks wasn't there as much. So it's just something to kind of keep in the back of your head. But Trevino Morales, Miguel Trevino Morales, he was right in the middle of this. By 2008, he becomes the national leader. Okay, and his name Z40 is, he's the man. He's the most feared, one of the most feared drug lords in Mexico and the United States. They called him like a cartel gatekeeper. Any areas controlled by Los Zetas, they had to pay him. Bribed, intimidated everybody, was feared by everybody. They even said a lot of the local journalists in Mexico, you wouldn't even write about this guy because of what would happen. Would cook people alive, put them in what he would call a stew. Okay, el guiso, a stew, put in an oil barrel, doused with gasoline, and they're set to burn alive. Basically became almost like a cult figure. Would get into gun battles, unharmed, wouldn't make alliances. This is a couple years before his arrest. By the time he gets on top, he's running free, right? A lot of these guys, El Chapo's more on the run. Other wars are going on. He's unchecked. His power is becoming unchecked, okay? He was revered. He was looked at like as a god. Like I said, these gun battles where he's not hurt, unafraid to die. They said that they said that he had a problem sleeping at night if he did not kill someone. So, do I think Trevino Morales started out like this? No. Do I think he became this and got, off of his own power and everybody loving him? Even if they didn't love him, you were too afraid to tell him you didn't. You were too afraid to go against him. So like I said, he had yes men around him. They would do anything to impress him. It's just it's a breeding ground for the violence that you see. It said that he would ask his victims how they wanted to be killed. It said that he enjoyed eating the hearts of his victims even when they were alive. It said that he believed that if he was doing this, it would make him invincible. And just it helped build that that lore, that cult-like figure, the following, people wanted to be around him. It just built the story up and story up and story up. But he also did a lot of, these were exposed as enemies, but he also was responsible, it said, for the murder of 72 migrants in 2010, massacred 193 people a year later in San Fernando, Tamaulipas, threatened to shoot down a plane in August of 2012. So, his time eventually was going to have to come to him, because you can't keep doing these things. You talk about like Pablo Escobar even was blowing up planes and airlines and killing anybody that got in his way. When you reach a certain level of violence, especially nowadays, it's just going to have to stop. You are so out of control. You are so drunk off your own power. There's only one way for it to end, really. There's really only one way for it to end. So, in that time, though, in those years, he was the head. He sure built up the Zetas to be considered one of the most powerful, feared, dangerous criminal organizations in Mexico and basically in the entire northern hemisphere. I remember watching videos on these guys. These guys were no joke. It was just crazy the amount of power and the viciousness they had. And he backed up everything he said. He was just. He was the man. He was the guy that was. He was the guy that was the most feared, the most touched. I mean, Chapo and all these guys probably had a little bigger names, but Trevino Morales was right up there with them in the eyes of a lot of people. Eventually, he was finally captured by the Mexican Marines, and basically what ends up happening is there's a lot of infighting. Right, the Zetas. They're at their top for a long time, but what ends up happening, sure enough, is over time, things begin to go down. Things begin to not be as good as they once were, just like anywhere else. So he ends up finally getting arrested at 3:45 a.m. on July 15th, 2013. No shots were actually fired. The truck he was in was intercepted by a Black Hawk helicopter from the Navy. One attempt, I guess, was made by trying to run through some bushes, but he was caught. He was caught. Now, this is crazy. He was caught with $2 million in cash, 8 weapons, and 100 rounds of ammunition. A couple other guys were arrested with him. His mugshot started to make rounds. One interesting part, when you see the video with him, right, when he comes off the plane and he's with the Mexican Marines, he's not handcuffed. He's just walking along, black polo on, a little beat up, a little scuffed up, but he's just walking along. So it just kind of gives you an idea of what it's like being arrested in Mexico when you're a top guy. It's not like the United States. I don't know if you guys ever seen the video of El Chapo when he lands in New York, when he lands on the American soil, and he's handcuffed. He's sitting there. His eyes are huge, and I don't want to say scared, but he is well aware of where he's at. He's no longer in Mexico. And the look is different when you're no longer in Mexico. You are in the United States, and you are at their mercy. The way Trevino Morales was walking around did not look scared. I mean, I'm sure he wasn't happy to be there, but he did not look scared. He's been transferred around to some high security prisons, and that's where he continues to remain today. His family was involved with a lot of this. Him and his brother had a quarter horse racing group, that was eventually shut down. People died over this arrest. People took over power after his arrest. It said his younger brother, Omar Trevino Morales, he said to have replaced him in the Los Zetas. He ended up getting captured. So there's just all kinds of ripple effects from this, but the man himself, Z40, Miguel Angel Trevino Morales, is a man that will go down in cartel history. Guy that I've seen certain things on, And he's got a huge name, but like I said, it's not as big as some of the other ones, El Chapo, Pablo Escobar, even El Mayo, or Miguel Angel Felix Gallardo, or the Rafa Quinteros. This guy, though, his crimes, the things he did, they all did bad stuff, but when you really read, this guy was a psychopath. This guy was freaking scary. And he's just got a really interesting story. So, there you have it. I really hope you guys enjoyed the video. I'm trying to get these cranked out. The more I can put out a week, the better. Thanks again, guys.